You're watching KLTX, Channel 15, serving the city of Lufkin.
Today on Screen It or Stream It,
we're coming up on the 50th anniversary of the moon landing.
Assuming we actually went there in the first place.
Don't tell me you're one of those skeptics.
It's not like you can see the alleged landing sites with a telescope and nobody has been back since. It's not like there's any actual proof.
You mean aside from the eyewitness testimonies of almost 20 people who went to the moon, 12 of which walked on its surface, there's also thousands of photographs, endless hours of video that was shot on film cameras and broadcast live at the same time, and a few hundred pounds of rocks and dust that was brought back by the astronauts. This is even counting the hundreds of thousands of people that built the machines and programmed the computers that took them there and back. You're right, aside from that, there is absolutely no proof whatsoever.
Yeah? That all seems pretty thin to me.
July 20th, 1969 was the first time in history that we heard men speak from the surface of another world.
It has now been 50 years since man first set foot on the moon, so we wanted to take a look back at that historic moment.
As grand an achievement as it was, it only becomes more impressive in the context of history of airplane technology.
The first powered flight took place on December 17, 1903.
Orville and Wilbur Wright invented the first control system that allowed a fixed-wing aircraft to be steered, which proved the engineering concept.
Initially seeming just a passing curiosity, airplanes saw use in World War I, and then revolutions in aerodynamics caused far wider use in the coming decades as larger and more efficient designs were created.
Then, a maximum speed limit was discovered.
At just over 600 miles per hour, pilots would lose control as they hit the speed of sound.
Described by some as a brick wall in the sky, aircraft would be ripped apart by turbulence.
Then, on October 14, 1947, Chuck Yeager flew a Bell X-1 rocket plane, an experimental design faster than the speed of sound, causing the first sonic boom and increasing engineering understanding of what was possible.
Just 10 years later, on October 4th of 1957, the Soviet Union launched the first man-made satellite into orbit.
Sputnik was a technical achievement that ignited the space race as the United States didn't want to seem outdone.
Losing out to the Soviet Union again on April 12, 1961, when Yuri Gagarin became the first man to orbit the Earth. President Kennedy felt the need for an American victory.
Just after NASA achieved their first flight of Project Mercury, putting Alan Shepard into space on May 5, 1961, President Kennedy proposed that the United States commit itself to putting a man on the moon and returning him to Earth before the end of the decade.
The engineering and technical innovations that had to be mastered from that point were staggering.
Rocketry had to be improved, with engine power seeing an increase to almost 20 times what had previously been possible.
Test flights would be needed to prove the hardware, and mathematics would be necessary to sustain human life, navigating in orbit, and learning how to dock to spacecraft.
Spacesuits had to be developed that allowed men to exit their vehicle once they got to the moon.
Advancements in computer technology and reliability were also needed, as was the construction of simulators and the actual spacecraft that would make the journey.
The Apollo program employed an estimated 400,000 engineers, scientists, and technicians from over 20,000 companies and universities who came together to accomplish these goals.
The astronauts were the most visible members of the team, but without the support and tireless efforts of everyone behind them, they would have been unable to take those giant leaps.
From that first flight in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina to Sputnik sailing into orbit, 54 years had passed.
From that day in October, it was only 12 years before Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin walked on the surface of the moon, with the message, "We came in peace for all mankind."
Certainly without the national posturing, it wouldn't have happened when it did. But spaceflight has become a far more unifying endeavor since then, starting with the Apollo-Soyuz mission when the United States and the Soviet Union collaborated for the first time in 1975.
After that, NASA's Space Shuttle program carried astronauts from 16 countries into orbit, even helping with repairs to Russia's Mir space station.
The Space Shuttle was also vital in construction of the International Space Station, where cooperative efforts for science and exploration continue today.
NASA has new objectives that include returning men and women to the moon, not to visit, but to begin a sustained presence there.
This will teach us how to survive in the hostile environments of other worlds and pave the way for manned missions to Mars and beyond.
50 years ago, that small step was taken.
It was the culmination of nearly a decade of exhaustive effort.
It was a wondrous example of what can be achieved in the very best tradition of working together to accomplish a shared goal.
Well, since we're talking about moon landing and first moon landing, specifically history, I think we should talk about First Man first.
Well, it is the most recent one, so.
It is. It's recent, and I enjoyed it. It was fun. It kind of... They really wanted to make sure you knew what it was like to be in the cockpit of every spacecraft and vehicle that Neil Armstrong tried to fly and crash in some cases.
Yeah, I kind of had a love-hate relationship with this movie.
I can understand that.
So, and I think the things that I liked also caused the things I didn't like.
Oh, that's interesting.
And so the movie, what we call it, it's like a docudrama, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of it's based on true story of Neil Armstrong and his like path through the space program up to walking on the moon. Mm-hmm. But the way it was shot, so like whoever the director was, the director of photography, like the choices they made, I don't need to know the name.
I don't have it actually. Didn't write that down, oddly enough.
But just the choices they made, it didn't feel like I was watching a documentary. It didn't feel like I was watching a drama. It felt like you were like if you were to analyze like the shot scenes and the pacing and the sound or very much lack of sound through a lot of this.
Yeah.
It was almost like you were watching a like suspense thriller movie, like with like a serial killer coming out of the shadows at any moment.
I could see that.
And it oddly, like, it really worked for the space scenes because it kind of put you on edge and it made you feel uneasy, which was really cool because when he's in the shuttle or when he's in the rockets, when he's in the capsules and when he's in the different machines and the airplanes and you're in it like the camera goes to his perspective a bunch, mm-hmm. right? So it's like puts you in the seat. Well, then you have that like uneasy feeling already, and like I know he's going to survive. It's based on history, but at the same time, I was genuinely like nervous in the seat, and I was like, oh man, and I realized that they did this to me. Like they planned this, and they did a very good job of it. The problem is there's basically two movies happening here. There's like two parts to it, right? There's Neil Armstrong, the astronaut, and then there's the like Neil Armstrong, the family man or whatever, and they're trying to tell both stories. Well, when the weird uneasiness works really well for those space flights, the weird uneasiness does not work very well for the family.
Yeah.
And I, not knocking the man, but I thought Ryan Gosling was a very, very, very poor choice to be Neil Armstrong. He just has this thing, and like it works in movies like Drive. Like he has this weird uneasiness to him that's like unsettling. Just his countenance, the way he carries himself, the way he looks. I mean, he looks like a guy that's about to snap and like stab you at any second. And he looks like that through this entire movie. And I know they were trying really hard to portray Neil Armstrong as he's kind of a weirdo and an outsider, and he's a guy with emotional problems and all this stuff. And he was trying to portray that, but you take that and then you couple it with that cinematography of the like suspense thriller, mm-hmm. and any second I was waiting for monsters to jump out or him to start stabbing people in the neck, and it just didn't fit and it didn't sit well. So I love the space, most of the space stuff. Did not care for any of the like interpersonal life, family stuff. I think a bunch of that should have been like cut out, and it would have been a better movie to me.
Yeah.
Now you liked it better.
I really liked it because it ended up kind of. One person described it as you went to see a space movie and they actually told a story about a man dealing with loss wrapped up in a space story, and that's fairly accurate. I'd say that's what they gave you, and I'm kind of a sucker for stories about dealing with loss, so I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the visuals. I mean, it was unsettling, like you said, very, but it was pretty to look at. Just beyond the unsettling, every time out the window view and what they did show you was really pretty to look at. And just the reflections in the helmets and stuff, and everything was just perfect. It looked like you were there.
When the movie starts...
In the X-15?
He's in the X-15, mm-hmm. and it's about 10 minutes before anyone says anything. It's just him in the X-15. You can hear his breathing. You can hear all the sounds of, the metal fatiguing and things being stressed. And then, again, that goes back to the whole, the way it was shot thing. But I kind of wondered, like, they either either used actual footage intercut in there, because there was
didn't though. That's what blew my mind.
But they like dropped the resolution and made the video grainy, and it looked like stock footage from 1961 when he's in the X-15.
It really did.
And it doesn't seem to carry all the way through, because sometimes it's perfectly clear and great, but a lot of times I kept ending up with these like kind of grainy, what you would imagine historical footage would look like from that era.
Yeah, found historical footage.
I did not like the story of loss. I thought it never went anywhere. He never did anything, which again is supposed to be based on a true story. But his daughter dies, and then it makes him kind of weird, and he suffers, and he kind of suffers in silence. But the thing I don't like about it is it kept doing these like not flashbacks, but I guess like his imaginings of whatever. He'd see, like there's a scene where he sees a swing set or something, and it reminds him of his daughter. And I don't remember if the swing set actually had a cutback scene, but then it would cut to a memory of the daughter. And he kept seeing the daughter in random places, which again goes to the like weird, like kind of creepy vibe. Like his dead daughter is sitting at the table, and he looks right at her. Then she's not. And it's like, why did that need to be there? And to me, that ruined what was probably supposed to be the most touching. Like at the end when he's on the moon, he opens his hand and he has the little girls. Like if it hadn't had all those weird, and it did it right before he did that too. When he was on the moon, it kept cutting to her. Yeah. And I'm thinking, well, and I guess it was trying to show his, she's always on his mind or whatever. But I just thought it wasn't done very well. Where if it had kind of gotten away from that and then gone with this, whole space mission, and then came back at the end when he opens a hand and then dares her bracelet, then that would have to me been like, oh man, he's still thinking about her. But I know he's still thinking about her because they show it to us every 15 seconds.
So you want more like a, not to spoil another movie, you want more like a Severus Snape reveal after all this time?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, no, I mean, I would rather be teased than slapped in the face with it.
Okay.
And I felt like I was slapped
that.
in the face with it.
I could see that.
And again,
which the other downside to that is a lot of the more nerdy stuff, which this is a movie that is attracting nerds. This is a nerd magnet.
But I thought a lot of that
got left out.
Yeah, I got thrown
because they were telling this other story, and that's the story they were telling. And
that was another problem I had. Besides the fact that they're throwing out what could have been really cool stuff, because they did the science techie stuff really well, and that would have been great to see more of that. But there was these time jumps through the entire thing. And sometimes it would, like fade out, and it would say 1962, and it would have the letters on the screen. You'd be like, oh, okay, we're going a year in the future. And then sometimes he would just walk from one room to the next, and it would be 4 months later. Yeah. And there's no indication that it is. And then like the kids come by, and you're like, the kids are bigger, or the wife is pregnant. Like they move to Houston. She answers the door, and all of a sudden she's like, 9 months pregnant, and you're like, well, she wasn't when they walked in the house, 13 seconds ago, And again, all this stuff is unsettling. Like it just messes with it, and I don't get why we.
There were a couple times early on I thought they were doing like a forward and then a backward in time, and I wasn't sure what they were doing. So, aside from the memory flashbacks, those were pretty obvious. It all stays in line, so it's not jumping around in time, it's just jumping forward the whole time.
But I don't understand why some of the times we're like, hey, we just jumped 4 years, and it tells you.
Right.
Sometimes it had the year, sometimes it had the day in the year. Yeah. And then sometimes it would just jump forward, and then you would eventually figure out, oh, well, the kids are different, or and it's like something's changed here, and it jumps like gigantic leaps of, like it goes from like the first Gemini mission to like Gemini 8 to like Apollo 1 to like Apollo 11. Yeah. Like, and it just, there's no inclination that we're doing that. It's just, hey, we're now at Apollo 11. Yeah. And I don't know why I thought that was a bad choice. I don't know why they did that.
I don't know. I know it would be hard in any way you're going to try to do it. It'd be hard to compress, 15 years or however long it was from 1950.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, it's a 2.5 hour movie, but and it's still, like I said, so much stuff got left out. They go to the moon, and it shows all these trials and tribulations of getting there and all the stuff that goes wrong. And then he gets there, and then he's back.
Yeah, the flight there and back is 30 minutes, if that, of the movie. It's very short for the whole movie.
But I'm saying that there is no back.
Oh, no, that's right.
It cuts from the moon,
Yeah.
and they're walking in a building, and then there's that giant jump in time again, and it's like, oh, well, guess that went well, because we never saw them leave the surface of the moon. They just, and I didn't care for that. And there's one other thing that bugs me, and this is kind of our entire society. So not just this movie, but this is everything. And we've talked about this before. I have. Like, I honestly believe you have to have heroes.
Oh, absolutely.
You have to have heroes in the world. When I was a kid, you could walk around to any kid and go, who's your hero? And they could probably list 5 to 10 people. And we don't like heroes anymore. We don't like good guys. Everybody's got a problem. We got to knock them down, slap them down. And I realized, like, every real person in history is human, which means they have flaws and they did bad stuff. There's nobody that's perfect. But we used to take people and pretend like they were perfect, and we would ignore the bad stuff and we would show the good stuff. And to me, that sets, which I know you have to show bad stuff. Go, well, you can't be perfect. But I want to attain, I want to strive for perfection, right? Man, if that guy can do it, I can do it. But I don't care if my favorite sports star has a gambling addiction. I don't care if he's an alcoholic. I care that he can, how fast he can run the 40-yard dash or how high he can jump. That's that's what he can do.
That's why we watch.
But every one of these documentaries, and it doesn't, or docudramas or whatever you want to call them, every single one of them wants to focus on all the bad stuff. It's like, what kind of dirt and crap and garbage can we dig up and show you what a human piece of garbage this person was? Why? Like Neil Armstrong, and they're like, oh, he's this kind of weirdo guy. Yeah, you went and found a guy with a brilliant mind that's great at math and great at engineering and can fly a freaking fighter jet better than most people can and can problem solve in outer space while flipping upside down. He's going to be a little weird.
Yeah.
He's not going to be a perfectly... Hi, guys, I'm the cool... No, he's going to be weird. And they're like, oh, he's weird. And I'm like, yeah, gotcha. But we don't have to focus on the he's weird part. Let's focus on the he's really good at engineering. He's really good at flying the plane and the spacecraft. And
he only got
so tired of that.
Nearly killed in aircraft and spacecraft 25 times, and they put most of them in the movie. No, they didn't really. They put a few of them in there though.
But the hilarious thing is, some of the guys are like, dude, everything went wrong and he still came back alive. We need to pat him on the back and give him a high five. And then the other half of the guys are like, every time he goes up, something bad. It's got to be him. We shouldn't set him up anymore. And of course, I don't know what the real exact history is, but as far as the movie goes, it's usually not his fault. It's something went wrong, some kind of
I actually
wiring
do know about the X-15 flight because I looked it up because I'm a nerd. He was testing it. It had on board some kind of an automatic. Basically, it was supposed to be able to tell what the G-force was and have a limiter so it wouldn't stall out. Well, he was watching that and not watching his trajectory and velocity, and the automatic G-force limiter did not ever cut on. So that's why he bounced off the atmosphere in that first scene. So yes, it was his fault, but it wasn't exactly an accident. He was testing the aircraft. He was pushing it to its limit, and it did not do what they thought it should do. So, it's an understandable thing to happen. I thought that was interesting.
It did kind of transition, though. At the first, everybody's like, he screwed up. But at the end, they're like, well, cool, he did that and made it happen. And we need to... And maybe that was a product of the rushed space program. And, he even has a line in the movie where he says, it needs to fail.
Right.
It needs to fail here so we don't fail there.
Yep.
Because once you fail there...
And that is important. That's... With research and development, people always get confused for getting off topic, but that's okay. That it's like, it blew up, it's unsafe. Well, at the moment, yes, that's why we test. And they say that, and it does sound like such a terrible line. Yeah. That's just, no, that is literally why you test. You have to know what will make it fail so you can fix it and make it better.
It's one thing I've tried to teach for several years now is kind of my perspective on life changes as you get older. I'm a prepper, I'm a planner. I want everything prepped to where things don't go wrong.
Right.
And what I've learned in life is it doesn't matter how well you prepare, things are going to go wrong.
Yeah.
And so you look at the Apollo 11 flight and all the stuff, and there's literally a point where they're landing on the moon and all the buzzers are going off, and he just finally just turns it off and well, screw it, I'm going to do this myself.
Oh, manual, we're just going to take it down.
But and I thought that was a great, I don't know if other people got that out of it, but I thought that's a great lesson that no matter what you do, 400,000 engineers and scientists, and we prepped and planned, and the reason it was Apollo 11 that went to the moon and not Apollo 1 is because they took it in baby steps and tried to learn and build. And even then, they still had so many problems. And so the key there was not to have someone who could plan everything to perfection, because you can't do it. The key was to be able to think on the fly and on the move and be able to fix those problems when they arrive.
You got to have people that can deal with what's going wrong as it happens, so that it doesn't cause a catastrophe.
Which would be a really good transition into another movie.
Go for it.
Apollo 13.
Yes.
Which
as much of it's more about the flight of Apollo 13. Unlike First Man, it's not about years and years of space history. So go ahead.
Well, but I think that was the epitome, right? That's like they go up there and just everything goes wrong, and it's like life or death. And you've got people in space trying to figure out how to fix it, and you got people on the ground trying to figure out how to fix it. I love that scene, which of course again based on reality, real life stuff. But when the guy comes out with just the armload of like garbage, and he's like, "Here's what they have on the shuttle. How do we make what we need out of this? Because this is what they got."
And then the guys started working.
Yeah,
got to get a pot of coffee going. That one almost as much about mission control as about the astronauts. Almost.
I like this much better than I did First Man.
It's if you want probably the best space history movie, Apollo 13 would probably be my vote, just because and partly just because it's such a compelling story of something that goes so horribly wrong. There's no way anybody should have survived it, but they did. And through tireless effort and work, and I love, there were so many great one-liners in that movie too. Let's work the problem. Let's not make it worse by guessing. Of course, failure is not an option. Everybody loves that one. But there's just a lot of great moments.
Well, it had a great cast, and I thought it was much better shot and produced. And I like the sciencey, the techie, the space. It was more about that. If I had to pick my favorite, it's probably The Right Stuff is my favorite. The
Right Stuff is a lot of fun. It's so much fun.
It is so much fun, and again, it's not. We're kind of celebrating the 50 years of the moon landing. It's more about the the first astronauts in the Gemini program, or Gemini if you want to.
Mercury. It's all Mercury.
Mercury
and it does have some questionable history in it, but it's one of those things that it's the legend of it. It's more about the bravado and the
Liberty Valance.
So just go with it.
We print the legend. And that's what I was talking about earlier, that we need those people. We don't need them.
If you want more history on the Apollo and more of Apollo 11, From the Earth to the Moon is probably my favorite one. It's a 12-part HBO miniseries, an hour each. So you've got 12 hours of moonshot. It's great. And it puts it in the context of history.
Well, each one is like each episode is a different what do we call it? It's
not a mission exactly, but
so like Apollo and Gemini.
Apollo 11 has its whole episode. Mercury and Gemini just had one episode about that, and then I think the year 1968 had a whole episode just devoted to that. And it's just a really great history, and it really puts the moon landing itself in context of what was going on at the time. It's
it's full blown documentary. It's not a movie
or docudrama.
But like, to me, if you want more like real life, here's what it is. You can't beat that movie. You can't beat that series, From the Earth to the Moon.
Well, they have the time to go into so many details that a 2-hour movie just will never have, because you don't have time to get into all of that.
Well, and it does a great job of what I was talking about earlier with we need these legendary figures. We need these heroes. When a legend becomes fact, you print the legend. But it kind of focuses on, look how awesome these guys were.
Yeah.
And it's both guys. Right? Look how awesome the astronauts were. Look how awesome the mission control guys. And I mean, imagine.
In fact, one of my favorite episodes was not about the astronauts at all. It was about the designing of the lunar module. And that was that company, the Grumman, I think it was, and just the guys, and they did a riff on The Great Escape, which is a great movie also, by the way. Steve McQueen and I forget who all else. A bunch of famous people in it. Charlie Bronson, I think. Steve McQueen for sure, I know, was in there.
It's been a long time.
But they've got the guy bouncing the ball, and the music was very similar. And they did that on purpose, because the guy, once they got the contract to build the lunar module, was essentially trapped, could not leave his office till they finished. And it's just a good show.
Well, and I can't remember. I believe it was from the Earth to the Moon, where they interview, I think it's Neil Armstrong's wife, when he's on the shuttle, and they ask her, did he tell you the odds? And she's like, yeah, he said it was 50-50. And he's like, really? We told him it was 30-70 or something. Like 30% chance you come back and 70% you don't. And he was still like, okay, let's go. And so my grandfather was a World War II veteran, and that's called, the greatest generation. And the older I get, the more I realize how true that is, the greatest generation. But to watch all that stuff and watch them go, hey guys, we're going to strap you to this giant explosive that's, stories tall and blow you into space, and me first. And they're kind of like fussing and fighting and arguing. I want to be the one to do it. And it kind of makes me proud to be a human. To see them. It makes me proud to be an American. It makes me proud to be a part of the human race. There's so many things now that I'm just kind of ashamed. Like, can I be a dog or something like that? Please don't identify me as human anymore.
And realistically, Hollywood, please give us some movies on the Soviet space program, because that would be really interesting. And I know a lot of it's secret, but just tell us what you know, because the stories I have heard have been super interesting. Yeah, well, that's true. But just from, they've had all the drama the same as us. They've had lots of great triumphs and failures, although they don't like to talk about the failures. We broadcast ours live on TV.
Whatever they haven't covered up.
And there's so much goodness to it. 50 years ago, July 20th, man walked on the moon. That's all our time. Thank you so much for watching Screen It or Stream It. And I'm not a moon landing skeptic. Just wanted to clear that up.
Right. He does not believe that conspiracy theory at all. He believes in the flat Earth conspiracy theory, but we're not going to talk about that.